Okay, so when we just left the Parmenides poem on nature, right, we essentially had, what's going on? Oh, there we go. So we had this set up, right? We had our guy, here he is, our man who knows, and he was standing at a certain threshold, right? And he was standing at a threshold with the goddess. There she is, G for goddess. And two roads are about to diverge here. And one is the road that is, and the other is the road that is not. All right, simple enough, right? Okay, but check this out. She says, continuing in the poem, so this would be paragraph 2, "Come now, and I will tell you, and you must carry away my account when you have heard it, the only ways of inquiry there are to be thought of, the one that is, and it is impossible for it not to be, is a path of persuasion, for she attends upon truth. The other, that it is not, and that it is needful it not be, that I declare to you, is an altogether indiscernible track, for you cannot know what is not, that cannot be done, nor indicate it." Okay, so what's important is and is not. I mean, you all know what that means. I mean, you know, the sun is shining today, the sun is not shining today. I mean, words we use all the time. But notice she qualifies by saying is and impossible it not be. And the not be is, we're going to hyphenate because it's sort of like its own kind of term, really. Okay. And then the is not, and as she says, and she qualifies by saying is not and needful it not be. All right. Now, consider any given thing. Consider a tree for a second. Okay, so we would say, you know, if I were to ask sort of this question, right? Okay, so here's my tree. Just pretend it was a real tree, not a drawing, okay? There's my tree. And I could point to the tree and ask you guys, is the tree, right? We can ask this question in philosophy anyways, is the tree, right? And in your English class, you might think, your professors might say, well, you know, it's an incomplete sentence. But in philosophy class, it's perfectly fine because what I'm asking is, in other words, does it exist, right? Because the word existence, right, has to do with the English word to be, the verb to be. So we're talking about being. So all I'm asking is, does the tree exist, basically, right? Is it there? Okay. So we would say, well, of course the tree is here, no problem. But notice, what Parmenides has told us is that it is also, if something is, it's impossible for it not to be, or to not be, right? Because given, we would have to make a choice between this tree. Is the tree here or not here? Well, it's there. I mean, this is a drawing, right? This is where it gets like weird because I've got to use drawings which don't exist to try to point you to things that do exist, right? So just assume that this is an actual tree you can touch, all right? And so, you know, we'd have to say, well, yeah, the tree is here, but is it possible for the tree to not be, right? So in other words, you know, could the forces of the universe have come together that this particular tree did not exist? And the answer would be yes. Because indeed, this tree started out as a wee seed, right? There he is, as a wee seed. And then he grew up, right? And when he grew up, he came to occupy more space, right? And he becomes the adult tree. But then eventually, he's going to die, and the tree is going to be there in the soil rotting away. Right? I don't know how to draw a rotting tree. But if you think of it, you know, so this part here, after the tree is dead and gone, is not, right? Because the tree is no longer in existence. This part is, right? And I guess we'd have to say the part before the seed aspect, right? So this part here, before it was even a seed, the tree was not. So at a point in history, the tree was not. Then it came into existence and was. and then it went out of existence and became a not again. So in other words, the tree does not fit the criteria for impossible it not be, because it's very possible for the tree to not be. In fact, if you think of all of history, all right, a timeline going backwards and forwards in all of history, the tree lasts for what, maybe, let's say 100 years, right? And in terms of all of history, 100 years is just a blip, which means that all of this time here is not tree time. I'll just say not tree, not T. And all this is not T for tree. So not tree time, and just this wee little section here is tree time. So if you add it up, the tree time is insignificant, minuscule in terms of history compared to the not tree time, which dwarfs the existence of the tree. So in other words, this tree is very possible not to be. And when you think of it, anything physical is in that category. I mean, ourselves included, right? If you think about yourself, we say, well, is it impossible for us not to be? Of course, it's very possible for us to be. Very possible for us not to be, because indeed we're all going to die, right? And when we die, then we shall cease to exist. Now, take out of this the idea of an immortal soul, all right, if we can lay that aside for a second. And think about just physical things. Nothing physical you could think of will last forever. The earth will eventually fall apart, right? The sun is growing and will dwarf it. Air on the planet, will come and go, etc. There is nothing physical that is impossible to not be. Anything physical could very well not be, given different circumstances. Okay, so the is not now. And she says, is not, and needful it not be. Needful it not be. So this is a kind of not that is so not. There's nothing even there to think of. Okay? So think about this for a second. If you say something that doesn't exist, let's think of something that doesn't exist. Okay, here is a good example, and what we have, my goodness, my drawings are not good, eh? That's supposed to be a unicorn. Okay? There he is. I guess horses have a more... okay, whatever, man. So that's supposed to be a unicorn. There's his horn. Alright, so we could say, well, does the unicorn exist? Now, we could say, no, it doesn't exist. But this needful or necessary it not be is kind of, the clincher here, because you've seen a horse, right? And there's the horse aspect. Not a big deal. And then here's the unicorn aspect. So the deal is, you've seen horns, right? They can exist. And you've seen horses. They can exist. And so all you've done is you put two things that exist together, right? In a way that, well, does it exist now? Well, no. However, it's not absolutely impossible that it can't exist, right? A horse with a horn. In fact, if you think of it, reindeer, moose, there's all kinds of horse-like things with various horns, right? So that's not the kind of nothing that we're talking about. What we're after is the kind of nothing where there's not even a word for it. Because, in fact, the word nothing is an amalgamation, really, of two words, right? No thing. And so there's not even anything to talk about. It would be like if I asked you to, go get a, and then never told you, you can't even begin the search because there's nothing to search for. Does that make sense? Now, one of the things that makes this idea of is not tough to understand is this concept, the concept of zero. Because it used to be that the ancient numerical systems always started with 1. So, like in Latin, you have 1, 2, 3. You've seen this Latin numerals, right? Or Roman numerals, as they often call them. And they'd always start with 1. The idea being you can't count nothing because there's nothing there, right? But as soon as you get this zero, it's sort of like a illogical, in a way, naming of nothing. So even the word nothing, which is really trying to indicate no thing, and zero are things which speak to something that doesn't exist, a no thing. So this is not what we're talking about when we're talking about is not and needful it not be, because there's not even anything to begin to try to talk about. There's nothing in the mind that could even articulate what we're talking about. So she continues, "Come now, and I will tell you," wait, we just read that. "For the same thing is there to be both thought of and to be." So the next thing we're after here is to be thought of is to know, I should say to, and to be. So the next thing that we're talking about here is, so knowledge is equal to being. So in other words, the relationship between being and isness, right? If something is or be's, you can know it. Then the converse would be if something is not, you cannot know it. Therefore, you can't know zero, you can't know nothing, if that kind of makes sense. All right. Now, if you think about this, if something is and impossible it not be, that means it has to always have been, right? So it must always be. Because you can never have a point at which it didn't exist. So there couldn't be a point in which it came into existence, nor can there be a point in which it went out of existence. So it doesn't come and go, it doesn't live and die, it must always be. Which then means we are talking about the eternal. Okay. So being here, since it is also eternal. Which then also means that what we know, what we can call true knowledge, also must be eternal. So there's an eternal element to all of these things. And the not, because it doesn't even exist, can't even be spoken of. There's nothing down there. There's nothing down that road. Okay. Look at, I'm going to stop here for now and check out Parmenides Poem Part 3.